What's up gamers, DreamcastGuy here, reviewing today Detroit Become Human. I think it's vital that I open this video by talking a little bit about bias, about the things in real life that can influence your opinion. There are some very heavy themes in this game, like child abuse, homelessness, surviving on the streets, and unfortunately, these are all situations I've had to face throughout the course of my life. So because of it, I think I'm going to have a little bit of a different outlook on how a game portrays them than a normal person might have. So keep that in mind as I talk about this game that, well, as somebody who's gone through it, that's going to influence me a little bit subconsciously no matter how much I try and remove myself from it. So what is this game about? Detroit Become Human is following three different characters as they go through and try and figure out who they are and what identity means. We have Connor, an investigator, an android who's programmed to solve all sorts of cases involving other androids who've gone crazy and decided to kill people. There's Markus, an assistant to an artist who starts to wonder if he could be a human in some aspect someday, who is eventually cast aside like garbage and must discover what he's gonna do with the rest of his existence. And Cora, a caretaker who's assigned to a household that has a father that's very abusive. He beats his child and she must decide, what do you do in a situation like that? Even though these people are all programmed to have one specific job, the underlying thing that kind of persists throughout this entire game is figuring out your own path. Even if every single part of your programming and life and morals says that you have to follow one path, that's not always the case. Sometimes, no matter how much you think that you're going to turn out one way, well, life can throw you a fastball and you never know where you end up. For this review, I think it's best that I analyze Connor, Markus, and Cora individually because their characters are quite different. The stories they undergo are very unique. But I first want to try and address what I think is the most genius part of this game's writing, which is that everything feels connected. Not quite directly though. I like it because everybody is off in different parts of the city doing their own thing at the own time. Nobody has the same problems at the same time. Now, something else that really helps is the fact that everybody is seen in these little 15-minute chunks. The game is broken down into very quick chapters, so at one minute you're trying to help do a giant painting, and the next minute you could be doing something like just trying to wander around and clean up dishes. Because of this, it actually keeps you very, very invested. The day-to-day life of a typical android is probably quite boring. I mean, these things were created to try and just be the thing that upholds society. Construction workers, investigators. That's going to mean you're spending a lot of time just standing around waiting for stuff to take place. So I think it was a really smart choice to make it where we see them in the most bite-sized chunks possible, constantly flipping around from here to there and really getting a better vision of not just what's going on, but a feeling for what's going on. Now, let's talk about Connor first because this is my favorite of the three characters. As somebody who's just been assigned to the police force, his job is very rough. He has to try and look into cases involving deviants. This is what they call androids who have started to break down in their programming. The core rule that every single one of these robot people has to obey is never harm a human. Now, that's pretty obvious, right? You don't want these things running around killing people. But for some reason, that's begun to happen. Only recently, though, there are millions of androids all across the planet, as they talk about in several different news reports and in some of the articles you can find. So there's tons of these things, but suddenly, just in the last year, for some unknown reason, some of them have begun to go haywire, killing people, taking people hostage, or just running away from their masters. Connor has been programmed to try and figure out why. Basically, each one of the times you're playing as him is trying to investigate another one of these cases. Now, his special ability that makes him unique when you're playing as him is that he can scan environments and create 3D recreations of different stuff that's happened. Say you see a body with a bunch of stab wounds in its stomach. You can scan each one of these punctures and realize who this person is, which direction he was probably hit, and then actually create a 3D version of it. A play-by-play that you can fast forward and rewind to see how every single part of it what actually probably went down. Now, this helps him try and solve cases, but it also helps him get inside the head of these deviants, understanding why they went crazy. Now, Connor is interesting because he's definitely the most invested in all this. He is a CyberLife employee, basically. His job is to try and figure out how this is all taking place, and it's really interesting watching it unfold. And it does kind of bring me to one thing that I didn't like about this game, which is that there are some decision points in this where you get to choose what's going to happen or how your character is supposed to react. But with Connor, sometimes he would do things that I just don't understand. Like, he'd catch somebody that you'd think he'd let go, and he ends up just arresting them anyways. Switching gears to Cora, let's talk about the fact that she's a character that really kind of shows the emotional side, the struggle of being an android. They're essentially slaves that are people because they have emotions, they can think, they can feel, but they were created in a lab, so because of it, they have no rights. They're made in factories, so they don't get to actually have an opinion or vote. Well, Cora is stuck in a situation that I just can't even imagine. She sees a little girl being mentally and emotionally and physically abused. She is seeing this kid hurt in a way that will scar her forever, and she has to make a choice. Do I save her, or do I obey my orders and wait for the bad things to happen? What really got me invested in all this is the fact that I did go through these things myself. I saw these things happen before me in my own life. So getting to be the third person watching these events unfold and being able to define my own programming to step in and help, it was extremely well done. This is a delicate issue, and I know some people before launch were a little bit worried that this would be very shameful, and I can say they handled it very well. I think the abusive father is written in a realistic style. I mean, he's addicted to drugs, he's not thinking clearly, and he's hurting his own kid because he's just so messed up. So I feel like getting a chance to rescue her from this situation, it's interesting because it's handled in such a desperate manner. If you really did just pick up a kid one day and run out of a house, you're not really going to be able to come up with the next move. Everything about this game, with each of these characters, feels like they're just struggling to figure out how to survive, especially when it comes to Markus. At the start of the game, he probably has life the easiest. He's living with a very talented artist in a giant mansion, and as long as he does the daily chores, it seems like things are going very smooth, until an unfortunate accident happens that I won't get into that leaves Markus in a junkyard. He's stuck trying to reassemble himself and figure out his path. Where does he go from here? Who can actually free the androids? There's some really good stuff in this game, but I do feel like the biggest thing that ends up holding it back isn't the writing, isn't the graphics, isn't the world. It's the fact that it's not quite a game. This is an interactive movie, and it really made me wish that it just went a little bit further with actually having gameplay elements. There are times when you're trying to crawl around and reassemble yourself in this junkyard. Let's use this as an example. So here I am pressing different buttons like X and R2 and trying to reassemble myself, and that's cool, but let's face it, these are basically just QuickTime events. I'm not having to do anything skill-based. This is also held back by the fact that there's this weird thing called the timeline system, where you can at any point freeze the game and look at all the possible decisions you can make. Now, this seems like a really weird choice, because if you're trying to get me invested in this world, maybe you should try and remove those kind of choices, making it where I'm very aware that this is a video game and I'm just choosing tiny little paths. It sort of breaks down the experience and cheapens the writing. This doesn't mean that the story itself is worse, but it really gets a little bit too handholdy at times, and even when I was playing this game on the hardest difficulty, I never really felt like I was getting really pulled in by the struggles of these people, because I knew that if I had to, I could back up, try again, and just choose a different one of these side routes. It never felt like I was really this person in their shoes, trying to be curious as to what's coming next, because unfortunately I could look at a flowchart and have a good idea what's coming next. Overall, I have to say that Detroit Become Human, when it comes to just general plots and characters, it's amazing. I feel like it's some of the sharpest writing I've seen, However, I really like having to interact with other people, win the trust over of humans, investigate cases, figure things out for myself. I like those moments. I just wish that it had a tiny bit more typical gameplay to make it feel like I was doing something a little bit more than just holding a controller and watching really fancy cutscenes. Okay, so we've heard some good and some bad, but let's over to the ratings board and put a big number on it. I am giving Detroit Become Human an 8 out of 10. Thank you all so much for watching this video. This is probably the most heartfelt review I've ever done, and it covers some really hard topics. Games like this are really inspiring to me because it shows that as an art form, this medium is trying to grow up. It makes me really kind of curious what games can possibly come next because we're constantly pushing the envelope. You are all absolutely awesome. Thank you for tuning in. Please, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, share with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. But do me the biggest favor of all and keep dreaming. Oh, hey, I was just playing a little bit of Grand Theft Auto on my Darth Vader PSP. Are you curious what I'm going to come out with next? Well, if you click this button, you'll be subscribed to be the first to know. Also, if you click over here and here, you can see my latest review and my latest top 10. I promise, it was super good. Or it was really bad and I'm sure you can just make fun of me in the comments. Either way, it'll be a lot of fun. Thanks so much for watching.